and welcome. I'm Kevin Lynn,
I'm Steve Lamb.
and we're with the Center for Progressive Urban Politics. And today is Friday, March 27th, and it's our weekly news wrap-up. And we got some great articles today, Steve, to talk about.
Oh, we do. Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely, because we look at things that are international,
National,
local,
and right down at our doorstep.
darn tootin'. And what we're going to talk about today is Mr. Bergdahl came back into the news.
Yes, Sergeant Bergdahl's back.
Also, interesting article in the LA Times how LAPD struggles with spike in violent crime. And you're going to love our analysis on that one. And also, something else that's local is the Public Utilities Commission and some of the hijinks and hilarity that you've uncovered there, Steve.
Well, and it's great because it involves my favorite local California State Senator Carol Liu and her husband.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, yeah. You know, state stories are also local stories.
Our own little oligarchy. And also, interesting article in the LA Times this week about a Santa Clarita restaurant owner accused of slavery.
Apparently he didn't know 1865 is a long time ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure he's confused about the whole thing. And also, last Sunday I attended CicLAvia.
Oh.
And a lot of fun, thousands of bicyclists out there, so we'll talk about that.
Good. We've got a full show.
We really do. So without any further ado, Sergeant Bergdahl.
Well, as you'll recall, Kevin, last year the Obama administration exchanged a guy who was being held prisoner. He's a military soldier, American soldier, and we exchanged him for 5 Taliban who were in prison in America.
And you think that was a good deal?
Well, you know, I think one deserting American is a fair trade for 5 Taliban. But then I think American lives are worth more than any others, and I don't apologize for that.
We can be exceptional in that department.
Absolutely. So anyway, at the time, the Obama administration claimed that Sergeant Bergdahl was an exemplary soldier and that he had done nothing wrong, and he got captured by the evil ISIS or Taliban forces, and the right-wing news pundits claimed that he was a deserter and we shouldn't have made the trade. And now the Army is prosecuting him for desertion. So, you know, Fox News is declaring this as a great victory for them. And I actually want your input on this because you served as a military officer and you are much more familiar with the Universal Code of Military Justice than I am.
Right. You know, and it's interesting, Steve. You know, I left the military in 1991, but my experience with military justice is you're not going to find a more conservative panel of jurists anywhere in the world. I actually testified. One of my troops had been caught in been pinched for selling illegal substances, and it was interesting to look out into that that jury of officers and senior enlisted, and you knew this guy wasn't going to get any mercy from that crew.
Buzz cuts and the whole deal. Yeah. Buzz cuts and fruit salad, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So they will stick to the letter of the law. Now, I got a feeling it'll probably go, you know, obviously, you know, from what I've seen of the story, he did desert, and I think he will be found guilty of that, be sentenced, and as I understand it, he is not. They kind of dropped the desertion in face of the enemy or during wartime, so he's not
facing the death penalty.
Right. There's not going to be capital punishment involved, so he'll probably go to Fort Leavenworth and cool his heels there until, you know, it becomes politically acceptable to maybe commute the sentence or parole. Maybe, I don't know.
So that kind of depends on who gets elected president.
Probably does.
Yeah, because if you get a Republican as president, he's going to be there for at least 8 years. And if you get a Democrat, probably 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, this case brings up another sort of interesting issue. Bergdahl was a low-classified soldier who didn't have a lot of very important military intelligence to give to the enemy or anyone else. Yeah, we had a four-star general.
Would you
Uh,
be speaking of, I mean, not Betrayus, but Petraeus?
yes, yes, General Petraeus. I have to keep, reminding myself about the P instead of the B. And he basically gave away United States military secrets to a woman he was sleeping with, I guess, so that she'd like sleep with him more often or something. I mean, there's never even been a motive charged or alleged. And he did kind of have to resign his commission, but he's still acting as a consultant for the Obama administration
And not going to jail,
and
not
not going to
facing
jail.
a jury of senior non-commissioned and commissioned officers for some
Ye-
bizarre reason.
Yeah, and now I didn't serve, but my father did, and I always was told that in the military, officers were held in
To a
court
higher
higher
standard of
standard
the law.
than enlisted men. So I'm sort of shocked that a four-star general got a free walk, and this, sergeant who's seen battle combat and fatigue is like up against the wall.
So perhaps the teaching point here is, because when you even look at a broader sense, when you look at, for instance, Manning and
Hmm.
Snowden, people who revealed military classified information, or not military, but classified information in general, and uh, received the full brunt of the law against them, even though their purpose was to reveal not just embarrassments, but illegal activities.
Right.
Whereas someone trades military secrets for sex, and they get let off. What's the teaching point here?
I guess the teaching point is become a four-star general and date the hotties.
They succumb to the honeypot.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah,
Amazing.
it's a miscarriage in a lot of ways, and
Yeah.
it's a sad state of affairs. It kind of just reinforces that there just isn't a lot of justice out there anymore.
Well, certainly not a lot of equality before the law.
It's interesting. I'm preparing for my blog, in which I want to talk about how history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but history does rhyme.
Hmm.
And I was reading Hesiod, a Greek poet from the 8th century BC. And,
By the way, friends, you're going to hear a lot of Greek and Roman history from Kevin.
but, it's funny because even in Hesiod, he's right, this is 8th century BC Greece. The cry of the oppressed goes up, but, Hesiod talks about how the oppressor is also the judge. So there's no justice. It's, and as I'm reading Greek history, I see this evolution from, into aristocracy, from aristocracy to plutocracy. And then the rise of, in Greece, the tyrants rose.
And why did the tyrants rise, Kevin?
Well, it was the people who elevated them to fight the plutocracy, who they were getting no justice from. And then, of course, that eventually devolves into some form of democracy.
Amazing.
Athens was spared that because guys like Solon, allowed cooler heads to prevail and was able to, do land reforms and do debt forgiveness and things like that.
So you mean things like progressive ideas can actually prevent revolutions?
I think not only can they, but they certainly have in the past. My economics teacher, Ruthie Roberts, would impress upon us how the powers that be in the United States in the 1930s were wise enough to bend.
So apparently wiser than the new neocon crop.
It doesn't take a lot to be wise than the new neocon crop. Okay, should we press on to our next story?
I think so.
Okay, where are we in all of this?
We've lost ourselves on our paper.
Yeah. Okay. Next story is this blew. Well, I've been waiting for months for this story to come out, and in the L.A. Times they reported LAPD struggles with spike in violent crime. Now, for those who don't live in Los Angeles, we had between February 22nd, 2015 and March 21st, 2015, when compared to 2013, we had a 27% spike in crime. violent crime in Los Angeles.
Well, maybe, but maybe not.
Exactly, maybe not, because last year it was revealed that LAPD was fudging the numbers.
Well, it's very interesting. I used to serve on a local body called the Altadena Town Council. And in the early 2000s, we noticed that crime was going way down in Los Angeles, but not way down in the rest of the county. And so we started asking the county sheriffs, well, can you implement what Los Angeles is doing? Because, it seems like they're doing something that's making crime go away.
Right, you'd like to,
Yeah.
must be some good ideas
down there, yeah. So then we noticed that the crime stats started to change. But I noticed that in my census tract, there were crimes that I knew had occurred that weren't getting reported. And I would ask questions about this. And so what happened is they just stopped providing us with the crime stats.
Wow. Obviously, it did pick up a thing or two from
Well,
LAPD.
they picked up
the
a thing or
sheriff
two,
did.
yeah, from the LAPD. But, we did an analysis. Kevin checked into the numbers, and he found something really, really interesting.
Oh, this is great, Steve. Okay, so I'm looking at crime rates in Los Angeles by year from 2000 to 2012.
Okay.
Now, for instance, let's take a look at the number of assaults, because that's probably the easiest thing to fudge.
Right.
So 2000, it's 32,705.
It's a lot of broken noses.
Yep. Now, a year later, 2001, it rises to 33,080.
Okay.
Now, interestingly enough, in 2002, it drops from 33,080 to 32,429.
What happened in 2002?
Oh, interestingly enough, because I was on Wikipedia and realized that we had just gotten a new chief of police, Bill Bratton.
Oh, yeah, Mr. No Broken Windows, right?
Right, no broken windows. So you can kind of see. So he gets in there.
Okay, and then what happens in the next year? What happens in
Okay, let's keep
2003?
moving down where we have, so assaults. Now, in 2000, as I mentioned, in 2002, they drop.
Right.
Then they drop by 1,500 in 2003.
Wow, impressive policing.
Absolutely. There was no broken windows policies. Now, get this, between 2003 and 2004, it drops almost by 4,000 incidents. And the same between 2004 and 2005, it drops almost another 4,000. And then between
in 2 years, it drops 8,000?
8,000 instances.
That's
just
20% in 2 years?
Correct.
That's pretty good.
So, and it drops all the way.
Every year it drops.
Yeah. From what I'm looking at these statistics, every year it just drops precipitously.
Whoa, wow. The LAPD must be doing just a bang-up job.
Boy, they can run those pencils like nobody. So, and when it was revealed last year that they had been fudging the numbers, I was just waiting for that story to come out to kind of see where we stand. So, again, we're up 27%, but we're probably where we were. And that's kind of the problem, Steve, is when you fudge the numbers, you don't have the data. You don't have the information. That you're not looking at a dashboard that's giving you the data you need to make the decisions you need to. Because everyone thought, well, everything is hunky-dory. There's probably nothing more we need to do in terms of policing. I mean, if we're doing everything right.
Let me ask you another question, Kevin, and this is going to be somewhat uncomfortable. Didn't the police department get money for special programs that they were allegedly doing that was causing the drop in crime?
Boy, that's an element of corruption.
Corruption everywhere.
And it's just, it's like in the wintertime we're on the farm, the manure pile out back just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Because it's frozen and no one's shoveling that
Absolutely.
shit.
So you got to wait for the spring thaw. And I guess when we get to the summer, maybe we'll see a big thaw of this one. Okay. Well, anything else on our LAPD? Any thoughts on that, Steve?
Well, it's interesting because crime actually since the 1980s and even since 2000 overall seems to be, as far as we can tell, down.
Yeah, because you had asked me to take a look at statistics like that, and I'll tell you, when you look at LA, for instance, in terms of total violent crime, 1980,
Mm-hmm.
51,448 instances,
Mm-hmm.
and that's including murder, rape, robbery, aggravated assault. Now, uh, well,
But the question is, how do we know if we're really down or not? Because
right.
we don't know if these numbers are actually clean or if they're still being fudged.
Exactly, because in 2000 it was only down about 1,000 instances, from 51,448 in 1980 to 50,241 in 2000.
Mm.
So 2005 it appears to be had dropped to 31,000. But again,
40%.
yeah, but again,
But who knows?
who knows?
Were the numbers clean or were they not? And are the numbers clean now? We
Mhm.
don't know.
We just don't, and it's a sad testimony to the graft and corruption.
It's like having a broken gas gauge that reads on three-quarter full all the time and trying to figure out whether or not you need to get
Yeah,
some fuel.
exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, well, our next story, and Steve, this was one that's near and dear to your heart. The Public Utilities Commission here in Pasadena.
Well, it's not in Pasadena,
I'm
it's in the
sorry,
state.
in the state, right.
And it's very interesting. For a long time, the Public Utilities Commission was headed by this guy named Michael Peavy.
Hmm.
And Mr. Peavy is a former energy executive, as is his wife. Interestingly enough, his wife is my state senator, Carol Liu.
Oh,
Yeah. And Mr. Peavy was sort of asked to leave the Public Utilities Commission because it came out that he was taking a lot of gifts from PG&E and that he seemed to be not too very enthusiastically investigating them. Particularly, there was this little incident in San Bruno where they had a gas pipeline that blew up and killed 8 people and destroyed 38 homes and injured a bunch of people. And Public Utilities Commission
you'd think they'd be all over that.
Yeah.
You are the commission that regulates the activities of
Yeah.
these companies, and
You would think that the Public Utilities Commission would be putting on its jackboots and its iron gloves and going after PG&E, but instead,
with all the relish of the county assessor
oh,
coming down to your house,
coming down, or the zoning inspector, right? But instead, the PUC just kind of like dragged its feet forever on the investigation. Well, there's a new chief in town, and that's a guy named Michael Picker.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Picker has done his investigation, a new one since he's been on board, and he's found that the funds that were specifically earmarked for the repair of this line, in fact, PG&E had gone to the Public Utilities Commission and asked for a raise so that they could repair this line. Then they diverted that money so that it appeared to be a profit so that they could give their executives raises.
I'll be damned.
Yeah, I mean, in real life, if you or I did that, that would be criminality.
It is criminality.
Yeah, it's criminal. And if we as real people did that, we would be facing murder charges for the 8 people who died and various civil lawsuits for the homes. And I think since corporations are people and all, maybe we need to murder this give this corporation the death penalty and hand its assets over to the public to manage. And I don't really love state employees, but I think there are some things that are worse than state employees, and certainly a corrupt, semi-private, semi-public utility.
Quasi-public,
Yeah.
private, that has got a lot of money to throw around and make sure that its tentacles are represented in every board of every water district.
When you start studying who's on the water district, who's on the library districts, who's on the special sewage districts, who's all these little special districts, we have thousands of them in California, and there's a PG&E or Edison employee on every single one of them I can find. And that's not healthy.
And they're influencing the public with that. Certainly, well, not just the public, but more importantly, policy.
So some interesting things came out of this. There's a state senator named Jerry Hill from San Mateo,
Okay.
And he said about Picker's testimony, "This is the first time I heard a PUC official admit or state that as a fact, that is, that PG&E was at fault." And then,
Surprise, surprise.
yeah, and there are all sorts of officials. The mayor of San Mateo, I mean San Bruno, actually is saying what a refreshing change Mr. Picker is, and that it's nice to have some honesty and accountability at the PUC.
Mhm.
And the investigation of his predecessor is ongoing.
I wonder how the good Senator Lou will be assisting in that, or will she? Considering
I
she's pretty preoccupied with the bicycle helmet bill.
Yeah, let's make adults wear bicycle helmets. That'll save lives. But make my husband, actually enforce the law on his friends. Well, let's not look too hard at that.
Oh, as the stomach turns.
Right, so.
Okay, Steve, this is our fourth story, and I saw this in the LA Times and my jaw hit the floor. Santa Clarita restaurant owner accused of slavery.
Slavery?
Yeah, Santa Clarita, for those who may not be familiar, is a town north of Los Angeles.
Kind of north and a little bit west.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a strange place because when I was young, which I admit was longer ago than I like to realize, but when I was young, Santa Clarita was kind of a cow town. And I went there as a child a couple times to visit friends of the family. And my memory of it is that it was hot and dusty and that the dust smelled like cow manure. And there were a lot of cattle in the area. There are more cattle in the area than people. And in the 1990s, it became sort of a very large, endless suburban development.
Because I just see a lot of gated communities and a lot of...
Yeah. There's still cattle there, only they're in houses now.
Okay. Well, this is an interesting article. An Indian national was employed at a Valencia restaurant, endured 3 years of slavery, including regular beatings, and was so scared of his boss that he feared for his life if he ever tried to escape, authorities said. The victim's boss, 47-year-old Pardeep Kumar, was arrested Tuesday on suspicion of human trafficking and holding a person in involuntary servitude, said the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Captain Merrill Landheim. They don't give the identity of the 55-year-old Indian national who was being held, but I think this is emblematic of our...
Well,
really,
did he come in on an A1 visa?
I don't know, and that's something I would love to find out. Both the owner of the restaurant and the...
it seems to me that there's no shortage of chefs in California.
No, there aren't. But there is a shortage probably of chefs that are prepared to be exploited and given below market wages. Those you have to import, I think.
From what I understand, this poor guy was working 12-hour days,
Yes,
7 days a week.
7 days a week, right.
So he was working a 90-hour work week.
Mm-hmm.
So 50 of those hours should have been overtime, right?
Oh, and I'm sure he didn't get that overtime.
I'm betting not.
It's interesting, Steve. A few years ago, I was in one of my favorite, at the time, it was one of my favorite restaurants in downtown Los Angeles. And one of the owners pulled up, because I was eating and, as always, reading a book, and the owner pulled up and sat down with me.
Okay.
We got talking, and she obviously knew how I stand on unbridled immigration.
Well, you're sort of well known for that in the Democratic Party, Kevin.
I am.
Yeah.
And she goes, "You need to understand something, Kevin. I cannot do this business without my illegals."
My illegals?
My illegals.
Personal possession.
Personal possessions. That's that's exactly what she said to me. And she goes, "I can't get a native born to stand over that stove for 8 hours. We had a manager here, and she took us to the labor board."
Well, were you violating the law?
Yeah, and I'm sure these illegals, because she went on to say, if one of them's sick, someone will be there to show up for them. They'll never leave me hanging. And I'm like, wow. And I bet you don't pay any overtime. I bet there's no vacation pay thrown in there.
In those days, there was no medical, yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right.
So, and like you said, were there actual grounds for you being taken to the labor board? Were you taking advantage of someone? And we're a stone's throw from Skid Row, which is where America seems to cast off all those people. They've kicked off the American dream or the trajectory of the American dream.
You know, people say to me all the time that Americans won't do various kinds of jobs. And a lot of those jobs are jobs that I actually at one time in my youth held and did. So it's kind of like particularly annoying and insulting to me to hear that Americans won't do those jobs like construction and so forth. And what they really won't do is they won't do those jobs for slave wages and slave conditions.
Absolutely.
You know, the wages, the average wages for carpenters on construction jobs now in 2015, the hourly wage, the actual, not adjusted for inflation, but the numeric dollars, is 30% below what it was when I started in 1978. Okay, it's 30% below the average in 1978. And you think there's been a little bit of inflation since then?
You think?
And, you know, there are all kinds of regulatory laws that have been passed since then about how you're supposed to treat workers on a job site, but those are not enforced.
No.
And workers on job sites, on construction job sites now, are typically treated in a far worse condition, actually as though they were animals, than they were in 1978. So yes, it's true. Americans won't do those jobs as if they are chattel property. And really the only difference between this Indian dude and your lady friend who owned the restaurant is that the Indian dude was perhaps slightly more honest about enslaving his employee.
There's another story I'd love that's answer that, but I think we need to probably move on a bit. Okay, our next story is last Sunday they staged another, what we call in LA, CicLAvia.
And isn't that kind of like where they close off the road to automobiles and you get thousands upon thousands of people walking and riding their bicycles and their skateboards all over the place?
Absolutely. And this last one was done up in the San Fernando Valley for the first time.
The sacred center of the car culture?
Right. We're actually doing all that along Ventura Boulevard.
Oh, my Lord.
And again, I bet you there were 30,000 people. I could be wrong, but it was packed. And between that, and then, you know, just last night, a number of bicyclists had shown up to a public meeting that was discussing allowing cars onto Mount Hollywood. Everyone knows the famous Hollywood sign.
Well, and that's become a problem for the neighbors.
It's a problem for the neighbors and for those who want to bike and walk around Griffith Park and not have to deal with cars. And 200 people, standing room only, showed up to that meeting.
That's good. And most of those were bicyclists.
Many were bicyclists because you could see them streaming up the hill to it.
Oh.
And it tells me, from a political standpoint, if you're looking at re-election in the next few years, this is a group of people you want to make sure that you're at least having a conversation with, because I think it speaks to not a car fatigue in Los Angeles, but people are looking for alternate ways to get around and be more localized, I think.
You know, when I was first on the Altadena Town Council 30 years ago, some minor issue came up and it somehow impacted horses. And in those days, Altadena had a lot of equestrians. And I made some sort of slightly less than neutral, and it wasn't like a total slam, but some slightly less than neutral statement about horses. I had 18 phone calls in the morning. Angry, livid horse people. And I learned an important lesson that day, which is the horse is a sacred animal in Altadena, and you better agree with what its owners want, because they vote. And the thing about cyclists that I look at is I go, okay, they're highly physically fit. They tend to be 10 to 20 years younger than me. And I disagree with them to a certain extent, but they're highly motivated politically. And they are already organized. They also, amazingly enough, slightly feel that they're an oppressed class. And, you know, I don't know how a guy who's riding a $4,000 fixie can be a member of an oppressed class, but whatever. But these people are going to be a small but vocal and important faction that's going to sway elections one way or another in Los Angeles. Very often elections for city council or for even county board of supervisor and local city elections are won by margins that are incredibly small.
I think in the
300 votes. And if you can get 2,000 cyclists out, I mean, they are the election.
Because you might have 2,000 people vote in a city council race,
Right.
at an off year.
I mean, it's amazing, really. I mean, how huge the population of Los Angeles is, and how few people vote in those elections, and the difference between winning and losing is like 200-300 votes often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it'll be an interesting group, and I've, personally, I paid it because I do bicycle a lot. I'm not a recreational bicyclist. I probably have more miles on my bicycle than I do my truck because
Yes.
I tend to run all my errands on my bicycle and I have more commute. So I'm not, when someone says, oh, well, we're building the bike paths along the river, I'm unconcerned about that. I want to see bike lanes on the road where I'm sharing that road with automobiles because I'm riding along, generating about 7 watts of power.
Yeah.
And then here comes this truck, with 300 horsepower. I want to have a little more protection out there. So,
Well, that's one of the things I think that's a major issue that's not being addressed correctly, either in the bicycling community or in the planning community. The right way to do a bicycle lane is not painting a blue stripe down the parkway where cars are parking. The right way is grade separated, dedicated bicycle lanes.
like we see in the Netherlands, for
Well, we
instance.
have those in the Netherlands, we have them in Sweden, we have them in Denmark. And in Los Angeles, where traffic is already at nearly failure levels, narrowing the lanes, the automotive traffic lanes, and having bicyclists having to fight people getting in and out of their cars in those narrow lanes is not a safe situation, and we really need to address it from a serious planning standpoint.
Agreed.
Of course, that's going to cost money. That's going to mean infrastructure improvement.
Right, exactly. It's not like, well, next year we'll put some money into the budget for that.
Yeah.
This is a long-term, big-ticket item.
It really is.
Yeah, and it needs to really be approached with that kind of seriously. And unfortunately, in the city of Los Angeles and Los Angeles County, when you look at what's going on with our infrastructure, whether it's water or power, the lack of investment, the lack of maintenance, the malinvestment going on is almost stupefying, and it's kind of frightening. When you look, for someone who would want to have long-term prospects in this area.
Well, what I think is even more frightening is when you look at the planning level. I commented last year on the Los Angeles County General Plan, which is up for renewal. And one of the things that I noticed is they are planning on increasing the county population. And they're planning on increasing it a lot in the desert. And, yeah, I know.
There's no water. There's no water here. There's less water there.
But one of the things that I asked the planning deputy is, okay, you're raising the population by this many million people over the next 30 years. I don't see anywhere in the general plan where you're putting a sewage reclamation facility, and they're already under federal observation because they're already overtaxed. They're already running at 160% of capacity.
Weren't most of those sewer systems and a lot of our built in the 30s during the Depression?
Oh, Kevin, it's worse than that. The main trunk lines for a lot of this stuff, like the main trunk lines that go through Pasadena, were put in the 1880s.
Wow.
And they're brick. They're underground and brick. And, the sewage reclamation facilities were put in the 30s, 40s, some of them in the 50s. They're all ancient, and they never anticipated the kind of load that they have on them now. And it's gigantic. I mean, in the last 30 years, we've raised the population of Los Angeles County 40%. Since the 1930s, we've tripled it.
We've not tripled. We haven't even come close.
No, we haven't tripled the sewage.
Haven't doubled it. We haven't even probably increased it by 20%.
No, 15%.
Unbelievable.
So, we're taking developer money, and we're taking increases in property tax. And it's really hard to figure out where it's going because it's not going to infrastructure, it's not going to parks, it's not going to maintenance. It seems to all be going to high public employee retirement. As near as I can figure out, that's the only place where the money could possibly be going.
Well, we screwed up. We should have worked for the government.
You know, every day more and more that becomes clear.
Yeah. Well, Steve, I think we're up against a wall of time here.
Okay.
But wow, I think a lot of great stories this week, and certainly looking forward to what's going to happen next week.
Oh, you know, every week it's a new adventure.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this week. Stay tuned. Visit the site, the Center for Progressive Urban Politics, CFPUP.org, frequently for updates, new blogs, videos, audios, and great pics.
And have a good week and be safe out there.
Sure.